Captain Jake Morrison gripped the controls of his damaged freighter as warning alarms screamed through the cockpit. The Alliance patrol had caught him completely off guard while he was making a routine supply drop on the outer rim. Now his ship was falling apart around him as he desperately searched for somewhere to land on the desolate mining planet below. The surface of Kepler 44 to be rushed up to meet him. All rust-colored rocks and abandoned mining equipment. His ship hit the ground hard, skidding across the barren landscape before finally coming to rest against a massive boulder. Smoke poured from the engine compartments as Jake hauled himself out of the pilot's seat, checking for injuries. A few bruises and cuts, nothing serious. As he stumbled out of his wrecked ship, something caught his eye in the distance. Another crash site, much smaller than his own. Steam rose from what looked like an escape pod wedged between two rocky outcroppings. Jake grabbed his medical kit and survival pack, then made his way across the rocky terrain to investigate. The escape pod was definitely not human design. Its smooth, organic curves and bioluminescent panels marked it as Zephyrian technology. As Jake approached, he heard a soft whimpering sound from inside. He found the emergency release and carefully opened the pod's canopy. Inside lay an alien. Girl, probably in her early 20s by human standards. Her skin had a pale blue tint that reminded Jake of winter morning skies, and her long silver hair was matted with what looked like blue blood. She was unconscious, breathing shallow and fast. Her species was humanoid enough that Jake could recognize the signs of shock and injury. When she opened her eyes, they were the deepest violet Jake had ever seen. The moment she saw him, terror filled those beautiful eyes, and she tried to scramble, backward in the cramped pod, crying out in a language he didn't recognize. Hey, it's okay, Jake said softly, holding up his hands to show he wasn't armed. I'm not going to hurt you. You're injured. Let me help. She shook her head frantically, speaking rapidly in her alien tongue. Her left arm that needed immediate attention. He slowly reached for his medical kit, moving carefully so he wouldn't startle her further. Look, I know you can't understand me, but you're bleeding pretty badly. If I don't patch that up, you're going to be in serious trouble. He pulled out a universal medical scanner, one of the few pieces of advanced tech he'd managed to acquire in his smuggling career. The scanner's gentle blue light seemed to calm her slightly. When it beeped softly and displayed her vital signs, her eyes widened with what looked like recognition. Maybe she understood technology even if she didn't speak his language. Jake worked carefully, cleaning and bandaging her wounds while humming an old Earth song under his breath. He noticed that his humming seemed to relax her, so he kept it up as he worked. Her breathing steadied, and some of the panic left her eyes as he finished wrapping her arm. She spoke a single word that he somehow understood, though it was in her. Language. Music. Jake smiled and nodded. He reached into his pack and pulled out his portable music player, an old device that had been with him for years. He selected something soft and gentle, one of his grandfather's favorite acoustic pieces, and let it play quietly. The effect on her was immediate. Her violet eyes went wide with wonder, and she tilted her head like she was trying to catch every note. A small smile crossed her face for the first time since he'd found her. Music, she repeated, this time in accented but recognizable English. You ... make sounds beautiful. You speak our language, Jake said, relieved. She nodded slowly. Study. Your people. Before. She gestured vaguely as if she couldn't find the words to explain why she was here. I'm Jake, he said, pointing to himself. Zara, she replied, touching her chest gently, in the distance. They both heard the distinctive whine of Alliance patrol ships. Jake's expression hardened as he looked toward the horizon. They had found the crash sites. We need to move, he told Zara. Can you walk? She tried to stand and winced, favoring her injured leg. Jake immediately moved to support her, feeling the warmth of her skin through her torn clothing. For a moment, their faces were inches apart, and he caught the scent of something like starflowers. In rain? Together, Zara whispered, leaning against him for support, as they made their way toward the rocky hills where they could find shelter. Jake's music player continued to play softly from his pack. Something had changed in that moment when Zara first heard human music. Jake could see it in her eyes, a spark of curiosity that hadn't been there before. And as they disappeared into the maze of rocks and abandoned mining tunnels, both of them knew that this was just the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find on this desolate world. The abandoned mining tunnels stretched deep into the planet's crust, a maze of passages carved out by automated diggers decades ago. Jake helped Zara down a steep incline, their way lit only by the pale glow of bioluminescent fungi that had somehow taken root in the artificial caves. The air was cool and damp, carrying the metallic taste of old machinery and forgotten dreams. "How did you know about these tunnels?" Zara asked, as they found a relatively dry alcove to rest in. Her English was getting stronger with each word. She spoke as if her mind was rapidly processing and adapting to the language patterns. "Used to make supply runs to this place when the mines were still active," Jay explained, setting down his pack and pulling out emergency rations. Workers always needed things the company wouldn't provide: real food, entertainment, messages to families back home. Zara accepted the nutrition bar he offered, studying it curiously before taking a small bite. Her eyes lit up at the taste. "How sweet," she said with surprise. "My world, Zephoria, we have no sweet things." "Really? That's tragic," Jake said with a grin. "Sweet things are one of humanity's greatest achievements. Wait until you try chocolate." As they ate, Zara began to open up about why she was fleeing through space in an escape pod. "I am ... was cultural researcher for the High Council," she explained, her violet eyes growing sad. "My job was to study other species, but only to catalog their dangers to our pure society." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Humans were considered particularly dangerous?" "The most dangerous," she confirmed. "Your music, your art, your ... emotions. The council says these things corrupt the mind, make people question order and tradition." She looked down at her hands. "But I wanted to understand, not just judge. So I came to study you secretly." They found out. "I was discovered listening to intercepted human broadcasts. They called it contamination." Voice grew bitter. "I was to be sent for neural cleansing, to have the curiosity burned out of my mind." Jake felt a surge of anger at the thought of anyone trying to destroy the spark of wonder he saw in Zara's eyes. "Well, they'll have to go through me first," he said firmly. Zara looked at him with surprise. "You would protect me. But I am alien to you. We are supposed to be enemies." "Says who? Some council of uptight bureaucrats who are afraid of a little music?" Jake pulled out his player again. "Besides, anyone who appreciates good tunes can't be all bad." This time he selected something with a little more energy, a classic rock ballad with a driving beat. As the music filled their small refuge, Zara's, the entire body seemed to respond. She swayed slightly, her eyes closing as she lost herself in the rhythm. "It moves through me," she whispered in wonder. Like ... like electricity, but warm." "How do you humans create such powerful magic?" "It's not magic," Jake said, watching her face in the soft light. "Right. It's emotion made audible. Every song tells a story, expresses something the musician was feeling." "What story does this tell?" she asked, moving closer to him in the dim alcove. Jake listened to the lyrics for a moment. "It's about two people finding each other against impossible odds. About love conquering fear." Something shifted in the air between them. Zara's eyes opened and met his, and Jake felt his breath catch. In the underground darkness, with only music and soft fungal light between them, she looked. Ethereal and beautiful and completely real, all at once. "Are you cold?" he asked, noticing her slight shiver. A little Zephyrian physiology runs cooler than human. Without thinking, Jake moved closer and wrapped his arm around her shoulders, sharing his body heat. She tensed for just a moment, then relaxed against him with a soft sigh. Her silver hair tickled his cheek, and he caught that starflower scent again. "It's forbidden on my world," she said quietly. "Contact with other species, especially humans." "Good thing we're not on your world, then," Jake murmured. They sat in comfortable silence as the music played, both acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. Jake had traveled to dozens of worlds and met hundreds of species, but He'd never felt anything like the electric connection he had with this alien girl who was supposed to be his enemy. "Jake," Zara said softly, turning her face toward his. "The feeling in this music, is this what humans call love?" His heart hammered against his ribs as he looked into her violet eyes. "One kind of love, yeah. The kind that hits you like lightning. When you least expect it, lightning," she repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, I think I understand now." Above them, they could hear the distant sound of patrol ships sweeping the surface. But down in their hidden sanctuary, surrounded by music and growing closer with every shared breath, neither of them cared about the danger. Something beautiful was blooming in the darkness. Something worth protecting at any cost. As the night deepened and they pressed closer together for warmth, Jake began planning their escape route. But part of him never wanted to leave this moment, this perfect bubble of discovery where a curious alien girl was learning about human music and maybe, just maybe, about human love. The music awakening 3 days had passed in the underground sanctuary, and Zara was transforming before Jake's eyes. Gone was the terrified refugee he'd found in the escape pod. In her place was a being of pure curiosity, hungry to experience every aspect of human musical expression. "Play the one with the angry guitars again," she requested, as they sat in what had once been the mining facility's main processing chamber. Jake had discovered that the acoustics in the large cavern were incredible, turning their hideout into a natural concert hall. "You mean heavy metal?" Jake grinned, scrolling through his collection. "I thought that one scared you yesterday." "It did," Zara admitted, her violet eyes sparkling with excitement. "But fear and fascination, I am learning, are often the same emotion wearing different faces." Jake selected a classic metal anthem and watched as the opening riff echoed through the cavern. Zara's entire body responded to the music in ways that still amazed him. Her alien physiology seemed to process sound differently than humans, experiencing not just the auditory elements, but somehow feeling the emotional resonance on a deeper level as the song built to its crescendo. Zara began to move in a way that was part dance, part expression of pure joy. Her silver hair whipped around her shoulders as she threw her head back, completely lost in the driving rhythm. When she opened her eyes and looked at Jake, there was something wild and beautiful and completely uninhibited in her gaze. "This music," she said breathlessly, "it speaks of rebellion, of refusing to accept limitations. What is everything my people fear? And how does that make you feel?" Jake asked, standing up and moving closer to her. "Alive," she whispered. "More alive than I have ever been." The cavern's old mining equipment had been built to withstand massive sonic vibrations, and Jake had an idea. He began connecting his music player to the facility's sound amplification system. Cables and wires that had once carried the noise of industrial machinery now repurposed for something far more beautiful. "What are you doing?" Zara asked, watching him work. "Giving you the full experience," he said with a mischievous smile. "If you think my little portable player sounds good, wait until you hear this." When he fired up the system, the result was beyond anything either of them had imagined. The music didn't just play through the speakers, it became part of the cavern itself. Every note reverberated through the stone, creating harmonics and overtones that seemed to awaken the very walls. Zara gasped as the sound washed over her, through her, becoming part of her very being. She reached out instinctively, and Jake caught her hands, pulling her into an impromptu dance as classic rock thundered around them. "I understand now," she said as they moved together, her body pressed close to his. "Music is not just sound. It is communication without words, emotion made tangible." "You're getting it," Jake said, spinning her around as a guitar solo screamed through the amplifiers. When she came back into his arms, something had changed. The last barriers of cultural conditioning and species difference seemed to dissolve. In the face of shared rhythm and mutual attraction, Zara looked up at him, her alien features beautiful in the colored light from the old mining displays. "Jake," she said, her voice barely audible over the music. "I think I am falling in love. Is that the correct human term for this feeling that consumes everything else?" Instead of answering with words, Jake cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. The kiss was electric, charged with all the tension that had been building between them since that first moment in the escape pod. Zara responded with a passion that surprised them both, her arms wrapping around his neck as she pressed closer when they broke apart. Both breathing hard, the guitar solo reached its peak, as if the music itself was celebrating their connection. "This is dangerous," Zara said, though she made no move to step away from him. "The most dangerous things usually are the most worthwhile," Jake replied, stroking her silver hair. "Not the kiss," she said with a small smile. "Intense. I meant this." She gestured to encompass the music, the cavern, the feeling of complete freedom they'd found together. "My people will never accept what I am becoming." "Then we'll find new people," Jake said firmly. "There's a whole galaxy out there full of species who appreciate music and freedom and the right to choose your own path." Above them, the sound of patrol ships had grown more frequent. The Alliance was tightening their search pattern, and Jake knew they would have to move soon. But as he looked at Zara, swaying to the music with her eyes closed and an expression of pure bliss on her face, he realized that whatever came next, this moment was worth everything. "Teach me more," she whispered, opening her eyes and meeting his gaze. "Teach me all the kinds of human music. I want to understand every story, every emotion you can express in sound." "That could take a lifetime," Jake warned her. "Then we had better get started," she said, pulling him closer as the music swelled around them in that underground concert hall. With the thunder of human rock filling every corner of space, an alien girl completed her transformation from fearful refugee to passionate convert. And somewhere in the process, both she and the smuggler who had saved her discovered that love could bloom in the most impossible places, grown in the fertile ground of shared music and mutual rebellion against a universe that said they couldn't exist. The battle of sounds. The patrol ships had found them at dawn. Jake woke to the sound of sonic scanners probing the mining tunnels, sending vibrations through the rock that made his teeth ache. Beside him, Zara stirred from sleep, her violet eyes immediately alert despite having spent the night curled against his chest in their makeshift bed of emergency blankets. "How many?" she whispered, listening to the scanning pulses. "At least 3 ships, maybe more," Jake replied, quickly gathering their gear. "We need to move deeper into the complex." But as they tried to navigate the lower tunnels, the scanner pulses grew stronger, more frequent. The Alliance had learned to track them by following the acoustic signatures of their breathing and heartbeats. Every step they took was being monitored and analyzed. "They are hurting us," Zara realized as they found their path blocked by collapsed tunnel sections that hadn't been there the day before, forcing us back toward the main processing chamber. Jake's jaw tightened as he understood the trap. Alliance wanted them in the open space, where their weapons would be most effective. But as they retreated toward the cavern where they'd shared their first kiss, an idea began forming in his mind. "Zara," he said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "you said your people feared human music because it was powerful. What if they were right?" "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, Jake began rapidly connecting cables and power cells to the mining facility's old sound system. The equipment had been designed to communicate over the noise of industrial machinery, capable of producing sound levels that could be felt as much as heard. "They want to use sound against us," he said grimly. "Let's see how they handle some real music." The first Alliance soldiers rappelled into the cavern just as Jake finished his preparations. They were Zephyrians like Zara, wearing sonic dampening armor and carrying weapons designed to incapacitate through targeted sound waves. Their leader, a tall female with the same blue-tinted skin but cold, dead eyes, spoke in the musical Zephyrian language. "She says I am contaminated beyond redemption," Zara translated, her voice shaking with anger. "That I must be destroyed along with the human who corrupted me." "Tell her I've got a song for her," Jake said, his hand hovering over the activation. "Switch for the amplification system." The Alliance soldiers raised their weapons, preparing to fire. Jake hit the switch. The opening chord of the heaviest metal song in his collection exploded through the cavern at volumes that transcended sound and became pure physical force. The sonic dampeners on the soldiers' armor were designed to protect against their own weapons, not the raw emotional power of human rock music played at industrial levels. The effect was immediate and devastating. The soldiers staggered as waves of sound crashed over them, their weapons falling from numbed fingers. Ass! But Zara's reaction was entirely different. Instead of being overwhelmed by the music, she seemed to become one with it. Her alien physiology, already adapted to process sound in ways humans couldn't, allowed her to channel the music's energy into pure kinetic force. She moved through the cavern like a force of nature, her movements perfectly synchronized with the driving beat. Is our song? She shouted over the thunder of guitars and drums, her voice somehow carrying clearly despite the incredible volume. The song of freedom. Jake joined her in the center of the cavern, and together they became an unstoppable team.
Oh.
While the Alliance soldiers struggled to regain their bearings. Jake and Zara used the mining equipment itself as weapons, channeling the music's power through resonance frequencies that turned conveyor belts into battering rams and support beams into striking weapons. The Zephyrian leader tried to call for backup, but her communication systems were overwhelmed by the acoustic chaos. She looked at Zara with something like horror, seeing her own people transformed into something wild and free and utterly alien to everything their culture represented. "You are no longer Zephyrian," she managed to shout in accented English. "We're right," Zara replied, moving to stand beside Jake as the music reached its climactic peak. "I am something new, something better." The combination of overwhelming sound and the sight of their target, completely transformed into something they couldn't understand, broke the Alliance soldiers' will to fight. They retreated toward their entry point, fleeing the cavern that had become a temple to everything their rigid society feared, as the last soldier disappeared up the repelling lines. Jake turned down the volume, leaving only the gentle echo of the song's ending reverberating through the stone. In the sudden relative quiet, he and Zara looked at each other with wonder and exhilaration. "We did it," Jake said, hardly believing they'd survived. "No," Zara corrected, moving into his arms. "We became it. We became the music itself." She kissed him then, with all the passion and power of someone who had just discovered what it truly meant to be free. Her hands roamed over his chest, feeling for wounds, reassuring herself that he was real and alive in hers. "The ship, Jake?" said breathlessly when they broke apart. "We need to get to my ship before they regroup." But Zara was looking at him with an intensity that made his knees weak. "After," she whispered. "First, there is something I need to show you, something I learned about myself in the music." In the aftermath of battle, surrounded by the lingering echoes of their victory song, they discovered that the power of human music had awakened more than just rebellious thoughts in Zara. It had awakened desires that her people had spent generations trying to suppress, needs that could only be satisfied in the arms of the human, who had opened her world to possibilities she never knew existed. The Alliance might return, but for now, in this moment, they had won more than just a battle. They had won the right to choose their own destiny, and they celebrated that victory in the most human way possible, with music and passion and the kind of love that could bridge any gap between worlds. The new harmony 2 weeks later. Jake's ship drifted through the neutral zone near the Centauri trading stations, far from both Alliance patrol routes and Zephyrian space. The repairs to his vessel had taken longer than expected, but the time hadn't been wasted. Every day had been filled with music lessons, cultural exchange, and the deepening of something that had begun as attraction and grown into something much more profound. "Try it again," Jake encouraged, as Zara held his old acoustic guitar, her slender fingers struggling to form the chord he'd shown her. "Remember, it's not about force. Let the strings speak for themselves." Zara's brow furrowed in concentration, her violet eyes focused intently on the instrument. When she finally managed to strum a clear, resonant chord, her face lit up with triumph. "I did it," she exclaimed, then immediately tried the sequence again. The melody that emerged was simple but pure, her alien interpretation of human music, creating something entirely new. "Beautiful," Jake said, and he wasn't just talking about the music. In the weeks since their escape, Zara had continued to transform. Her silver hair now moved with a confidence that hadn't been there before, and she'd abandoned the severe, practical clothing of her people in favor of more expressive garments. She looked, Jake thought, like someone who had finally learned to live in her own skin. "I have been thinking," she said, setting the guitar aside and moving to the pilot's seat beside him. "About what comes next?" "Oh," Jake tried to keep his voice casual, but his heart hammered nervously. They'd been avoiding the topic of the future, both afraid to voice what they were hoping for. "I cannot return to Zephyria," she continued, "and you cannot live as a smuggler forever. Perhaps it is time for both of us to find a new path." Before Jake could respond, his communication console chimed with an incoming message. The caller ID showed it was from Harmony Station, one of the largest neutral trading posts in the sector. Captain Morrison came a smooth, professional voice as the connection opened. "This is Director Chen from Harmony Station's Cultural Exchange Program. I understand you have someone aboard who might be interested in our Music Ambassador initiative." Jake and Zara exchanged surprised glances. "How did you know about that?" Jake asked. "Word travels fast in the neutral zones," the director replied with a chuckle. "A human smuggler and a Zephyrian cultural researcher making beautiful music together? That's exactly the kind of story that gives people hope. We'd like to offer you both positions as cultural ambassadors, sharing human music with alien species who've never experienced it." Zara's eyes went wide with excitement. "You mean, officially?" "More than that," Director Chen continued. "We want you to establish the galaxy's first interspecies music education program. Bring together beings from different worlds and show them what you've discovered, that music can bridge any gap." Jake felt a grin spreading across his face. "That sounds like exactly the kind of trouble we'd love to get into." 3 hours later, they were docking at Harmony Station's massive structure, spinning wheel of metal and light that housed representatives from dozens of species. As they walked through the corridors, Jake noticed how other beings stared at them, some with curiosity, others with something like wonder. "They've heard the story," Zara whispered, squeezing his hand. "Shh, story. Our story. The alien girl who fell in love with human rock, and the smuggler who taught her to fly." Their first official performance was scheduled for that evening. In the station's central amphitheater, as Jake set up their equipment, testing the acoustics and adjusting levels, he felt a familiar nervousness. This was different from their battles in the underground cavern. This time, they were trying to create something positive, something that could change minds instead of just surviving them. "Ready?" he asked Zara, as the amphitheater filled with beings from across the galaxy. She picked up her guitar, the one Jake had taught her to play, and smiled. "Let us show them what harmony really means." The concert began with Jake playing solo, starting soft and building gradually. As his music filled the space, he saw faces in the audience begin to change, the universal language of melody reaching across species barriers that words never could. Then Zara joined in, her alien voice weaving through his human melodies, creating something that was neither purely human nor purely Zephyrian, but entirely new. Her vocal cords evolved for the musical's Zephyrian language, added harmonics and overtones that no human throat could produce. The effect on the audience was electric. Beings who had never heard anything like human rock music found themselves moving to the rhythm, their bodies responding to frequencies that spoke to something deeper than culture or biology. As the final song reached its peak, Jake and Zara found themselves standing close together at the center of the stage, their voices and instruments blending into perfect harmony. In that moment, surrounded by dozens of species, all united in appreciation of their music, Jake realized they had found their purpose. "I love you," he said quietly, just for her to hear. "I love you too," she replied, her violet eyes shining with tears of joy. "All of you. Your music, your passion, your willingness to show me that fear and fascination are just different names for the same beautiful thing." After the concert, as they stood on the observation deck watching the stars' wheels slowly past the stations windows, Zara leaned against Jake's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Giving up your old life?" Never, she said firmly. I was not living before. It was merely existing, following rules that kept me small and afraid. Now I am part of something larger than myself. Music? The music, yes, but also this? She gestured between them, encompassing the love that had grown from their shared rebellion. We are proof that beautiful things can happen when people choose connection over fear. As if summoned by her words, the first responses began arriving from worlds across the galaxy. Requests for concerts, invitations to teach, offers of collaboration from species that had never shown interest in human culture before. Looks like we're going to be busy, Jake said, scrolling through the messages. Good, Zara replied with a smile that was pure starlight. We have a galaxy to teach about the power of human rock, and I cannot wait to hear what new harmonies we discover together. In the viewport, a new star system was coming into view, full of worlds they'd never visited and species they'd never met. But Jake wasn't worried about the unknown anymore. With Zara beside him and their music as their guide, he was ready for whatever adventures awaited them in the vast, beautiful musical universe they'd chosen to explore together. Their story had begun with fear and fascination, but it was ending with something far more powerful: hope, love, and the eternal rhythm of two hearts beating in perfect harmony across the endless expanse of space.